Hey everybody, it's Matt Fury from Avid here once again at Sundance Film Festival. Little light snow is falling, very nice little ambiance here. As you know, we come out to Park City, come out to Sundance to talk to editors, directors, composers. In fact, we have a really talented composer with us today from the film Handling The Undead, Peter Raeburn. Peter, as we've discussed, being at Sundance, not a lot of people had a chance to see the film yet. So first question, tell me about Handling the Undead. What's it about?
Handling the Undead is a Norwegian film, my first foray into Norwegian films. It's a Norwegian film based on a Swedish book about three different groups of people who have recently lost someone very, very close to them, as close as it gets. And in their grieving period, these people come back as undead people, zombies, if you like.
I like.
But it is not in any way a kind of classical horror or zombie movie, either musically or in any genre way. And it is a kind of meditation on stages of grief and the human condition.
Oh, very good. Well, you brought up that it was based on a book. Something we ask editors all the time is, hey, well, when you go into a project that's based on legacy material, do you read the book? I could sort of see that benefiting an editor, but for a composer, would reading the source material like a book help you at all in finding the what you're looking for to create a score?
I think it can. In this particular case, I really was focused on the script and got involved in the project just before the shoot. And I was talking to the director and the lead actress last night, and they were telling me how they were using my early sketches of the score on the shoot to get everyone in the right kind of trance. Because the whole movie is so atmospheric that it has this kind of hypnotic spell on all the people in it. So even though there are different scenes happening in different times, everyone feels like they're breathing the same air. And apparently they played one in particular of my early sketches to kind of hypnotize the cameraman as well, a cinematographer. I didn't know that, I'm not aware of that before, but when they started sending me back the rushes, I was getting, this music was just on there.
Yeah.
And that was a first for me.
Well, so when they're starting to use your sketches, as you call them, you're still in the creative process, and you could be going in different directions. So they come back to you and say, well, Peter, we know you're not even close to done, but we really love what you're doing with this. Do you does that, I don't want to say box you in, but it certainly seems to set a path in one direction for you.
In no way on this project did I ever get boxed in. In fact, the director, Taya, she's so kind of, everything was work in progress until we were finished. So on some films, I've come to realize that, there can be a composition for the shoot in this case. Sometimes I have to write things to help the editor in that partnership so that we can, and some of those things stay forever, and sometimes they just help help him or her get the right cut to then allow me to finish things off. So it's a very kind of to and froing between all members of the team.
So before your sketches, did the editor have any temp score in place at all?
No, in fact, so I got involved before the editor. I mean, before the shoot. No, there was no temp on this film. It's a really hard film to temp. And the director really wanted to kind of, for me to start setting the tone. And that's often not the case. Temp has its great advantages and it's sometimes its problems, as we all know. Temp love is not a term we use endearingly.
Of course.
Even if it's my own temp, it's like, please can you do that exactly the same again? It's like, no, different film, different key.
Well, do you find that I've heard that from other composers is they don't want new, they want what you did before, but differently.
I got to say, I'm pretty lucky in that way. I feel like most of the projects I get involved in, the filmmakers are really interested in treading new territory and exploring into the unknown somewhat. Also, in this case, a hell of a lot. So I think there's a lot of trust involved, and the tools and the experience really help, but really they just help me try and see it for the first time. And that takes a lot of patience on everyone's part. In fact, attachment is a big problem in our work because, for example, the producers on this film, they got really attached to one of my pieces, and me and the director had moved beyond it. Sometimes we feel like people hear a lot about selling a scene.
Sure.
There was a piece of my music that was selling a scene, and then when I watched the premiere yesterday, I'm so glad that piece of music wasn't in that scene anymore. They used it on the trailer, they used it everywhere, but they didn't use it in the film. And I was part of that discussion because it helped achieve where we ended up, which was right. So I think the process of exploration, like with an editor, there's so many, in our bins, in our archives, we have a lot of a lot of history in any meaningful project, but where we end up is just a kind of distillation of that.
So you said the script is your source of inspiration. What do you key in on first? Is it a style? Is it instrumentation? Like what's that first step from the blank page?
I mean, I think it's the conversation in this case with the director. It was the connection. And trying to, as a composer, I have to really try and just tune in and free my mind of any preconceptions, of any instrumentation ideas, and just see what comes from that connection and from her vision. In this case, she didn't talk to me about music. She talked about emotions, and we discovered early on that the music of grief is a lot of love.
Yeah.
The music of impending zombie doom, now that's a different matter, and that's a grueling, throbbing, distorted, distant, and sometimes close, rather more scary sounds. But longing for someone and grieving someone. Now that is, in these cases, that is just, I say just, that is love, and so that's what separates this, I think, from a genre movie, a zombie movie in any way. There's a lot of heart in it, and there's not a lot of dialogue.
Really?
It's very little dialogue, which means the music has to work really hard, but can't tread on the toes of the rhythm of the piece. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of restraint on our part. That's kind of what I meant when I said about the process of discovery means you have to leave a lot of things behind, and actually this is a very artistically driven film. Even though we woke up to wonderful reviews, it is a very, it's not afraid of depth. It's not afraid of going there, which means that it does ask a little bit of patience. And I'm sure everyone can identify that, there's a loneliness and grief, and it doesn't move that quickly. No. So she seems to capture that, and along with the cinematographer, everyone in there. Everyone's in a zone, and my job was to help hold that zone. There's also loads of, at one point, so the film's called Handling The Undead, and at one point I just made, in these early sketches, I make all these noises and sounds and play around with things, with my tools and instruments and everything, real instruments and plug-in processing and outboard stuff, all of the tools of the trade. And using voice is one of the sounds I made. I just called dead people. I don't know why I called it dead people, but it sounds like dead people. But how can dead people have a sound?
I think they'd be very quiet.
Well, not necessarily. That's a massive assumption on your part.
Certainly.
Especially in the world of Handling the Undead.
Of course.
They're not that quiet. Although they're not noisy either. So I think that there's a resonance to the afterlife in this film. I'm not telling you what my views are, but in this film, there is a resonance. I am telling you what my views are. There's a resonance to afterlife. It can be internal, it can be spiritual, it can be anything. And this film taps into that. So this sound, Dead People, it's kind of like an atmosphere made up of voices, but you can't really tell what it is, but it's just there. Yeah. It's just part of the mood of the piece. And that's very much an editor, composer, and sound designer's teamwork.
Okay, so I know your process involves multiple creative tools to get to the finish line. Just in broad brushstrokes, if you want, just what are the big steps from a creative tool standpoint, where you go from beginning to finished piece?
Technically,
please.
Technically, the piano is a technical instrument, so I work on pianos and guitars and with voices all from the beginning, and trumpet. I play trumpet on this score, believe it or not. Well, there's definitely some trumpet in there, I seem to remember. So just whatever, but I start, my writing platform is Logic. That's what me knows best for a long time. So for writing, that's kind of an extension of my initial stage. As soon as we get into larger track recordings and mixing, straight into Pro Tools. And that was both in London, for the recordings that happened in Soundtree Studios in London, beautiful room, and then mixing in LA. I was about to say here in LA, but this is definitely not LA, is it?
Definitely not, no.
Mixing in LA with a wonderful man called Forrest in Pro Tools. We're so used to going between Logic and Pro Tools, and preferably not back again, that it's part of our workflow. I wish it was easier, but it actually as I go from Logic to Pro Tools, I have to commit to a lot of things. I think committing as a composer to the sound of things and to knowing what amount of control we're going to need later on, it's such an important part of the process. So it's always a huge relief for me when we make that transition. And then I sit back in a different way. I've stopped writing, and now it's about mixing. It's about fine crafting, and often huge decision making. Like, let's not even worry about that, or if we are going to worry about. And by the way, we do have a level of control with effects. They do travel across platforms. Mm-hmm. So in the old days there was zero control. Probably. Now there is. I do keep options open. I don't want to bake something into a sound that then either someone else on my team or a mixer can't, if I want to change it later. So I've learned the hard way that there's a best process. Equally, if I've got something that feels like something that I know that me and the director are completely attached to, and those are I call those positive attachments, i.e. don't mess those up. Because once you find that magic something, you do not want to lose it. And it's so easy to lose it, both in terms of where it sits in a mix or in terms of changing the sound of it. There's nothing worse than someone walking in the room, whether it's me or a director being like, or a producer, anyone, and that's like, that is not, I don't love it anymore. No. And so we talked about temp love. Well, temp love occurs within sketches of score. I'm very grateful that I've learned to how that does, to protect what people love, including myself. So that's just experience and streamlining the process. So yeah, I mean, and of course, goes without saying that, maybe it doesn't go without saying, but all the sound design, both in Norway and Sweden, and the sound mixing was all done on Pro Tools. Yeah, so it's a good dance. Yeah.
Well, you talked about finding the magic. It certainly sounds like you found the magic in this film, creating the score. I didn't know that the undead make noises, but now hearing you say that, I'm going to check it out. Peter, thank you for joining us today.
You have to be very quiet in your mind to hear them, though.
Well, that's not going to happen. Peter Raeburn, Handling the Undead, thank you for joining us. Stay tuned to the Avid social media channels for more great conversations with editors, composers, and maybe a director or two. We'll see you there.